Robert, how are we going to transmit this? What's the plan? Can you kind of illuminate that, please?
Well, sure. And how long is the show? Because there's a lot to talk about here. But so we know everyone has heard this, or we're seeing a massive increase in power demand, right? That we're because of artificial intelligence, heat pumps, electric vehicles, blah blah blah. You've heard all of this. So the given this demand growth, the thinking is, well, we just need to massively increase the size of the electric grid in the United States. And I've looked at this many times. I reported on it many times. In fact, I was interviewing a woman this morning, Jean Reeves Rollins, who is an expert on all of this. Because the system, there are many reasons for it, but because the electric grid in the U.S. is so big and it is vast. I mean, it's millions of miles of wire, and it's so complicated. The idea that we're going to expand it and do so rapidly, double or triple it, which is what this silly Princeton study did, said a few years ago, it's not going to happen. So in short, the electric grid that we have today, that is the poles and the wires, largely the system we're going to have tomorrow. So, but that's only part of the discussion. The other things that I'm doing is tracking the rejections of renewable energy projects, and this is something I've been doing now for 15 years. So, not the three issues you have to deal with when you build any kind of energy infrastructure is where are you going to put it, how are you going to connect it, how do you pay for it. So, both of the first two issues of how you're going to connect it is very difficult because you can't build much grid capacity. But then where are you going to put it? That's the focus of the renewable rejection database, which I've now been maintaining for 15 years. And I just added another entry just this morning. The city of Honolulu just issued new restrictions on new wind turbines. And in fact, the wind turbines that have been built in the region are going to have to be taken down in the next 6 years because they don't fit with the new restrictions. So all of this is the point to get to, which is that we have to be very sober when we think about energy and power and how the system works and how it's been working. And the way it's been working is largely the way it's going to continue to work in the future because of the just simple math and physics and land use constraints, all fitting together in this big picture of physical stuff.
Robert, can you do the 3-minute lesson on how energy works and why we need lots of sources? Does that sound like something we could accomplish? I know that's a big question.
Well, okay, so where to start? Yes, we need all forms of energy. We're not going to, electric vehicles, we've heard about these forever, and they're still, well, in fact, the history of the electric car is over a century old now, 120 years old, in fact. And still everybody brags about it, talks about, oh, electric vehicles, the rest of it. They're still single-digit percentages of the overall new car sales after a century in the marketplace. Okay, so what's different? Nothing's different. So yes, we're going to need a lot of electricity and demand is growing, but we're going to still continue to use a lot of gasoline. Why? Because there are 280 million motor vehicles in America. So we have to be very sober. And this is one reason why, we've mentioned a little bit the Trump administration, very excited about the incoming Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. He's an energy guy. He's actually the head of Liberty Energy out of Denver. He's a hydraulic fracturing company. He spent his whole career in the energy business, and marvel of marvels, Tom, we finally have an energy secretary who's been in the energy business. We've had a dentist, we've had lawyers, we've had, functionaries, we've had all these other, Capitol Hill staffers. We've had a former governor of Texas. Now we have someone who actually knows the energy business in the Department of Energy. It's incredible, but very hopeful that Chris is going to shake things up there, which it's badly needed in the wake of I would say a disastrous Biden administration in terms of their policies that they promoted that are really fundamentally anti-consumer.
But then I hear, and I don't know if this is true or not, that we are actually producing more oil now than we were. But you have all these other policies, so you get these mixed messages all the time, Robert.
Sure.
It's like, what exactly is happening?
Well, this is one of the things that's, somewhat anomalous with this administration, which arguably has been the most anti-hydrocarbon administration in American history. Remember, they paused the export of U.S. LNG, which was a stupid move, frankly. And I use that word stupid. It's the right word. They were bowing to the extreme climate activists in doing so. But it's very clear now that the Europeans are desperately in need of U.S. LNG for energy security, because it was just in the last day or so, the Russians are no longer sending gas into Europe. And it's a key change, right? Because the Europeans had been dependent on Russian gas now for decades. So the importance of the change now in this administration from from the Biden administration, which is clearly anti-hydrocarbons, to now the Trump administration, which will be pro-hydrocarbon. That's important. But it's also rather extraordinary that despite all the policies of the Biden administration trying to limit drilling, et cetera, that in fact oil and natural gas production in the United States have set records. And in fact, I think now we're at 110 billion cubic feet of gas per day in the United States, something like that. That's more than double the level of since 2008.
Doesn't that reflect on? I mean, if you try to squeeze the pipe, and you try to limit the supply, but the supply continues to grow, to me that says, well, we must have lots of supply, and so. Right.
Well,
I mean,
that's part of it, Tom, but I think it's important. I wrote a piece on my Substack called Iran Unplugged. So robertbryce.substack.com. I encourage you to read it. But Iran has the world's second largest natural gas reserves and the fourth largest oil reserves, and they can't keep the lights on. Well, why is that? It's because it's a corrupt government. And I wrote in the piece, electric grids will reflect the societies they power. And if you have a corrupt society, the grid isn't going to work. It's just the reality of it. So why has the U.S. been successful in all kinds of energy and power infrastructure now over a century? Well, it's in large part because we have the rule of law, and we have people who make sure that people pay their bills. In Iran, the mosques, schools, hospitals, they don't pay a power bill. Well, you can't give it away forever. I mean, you can give it away for a while, but eventually the system crumbles because the systems have to pay for themselves. So when you have the mix of strong government and entrepreneurial capitalism, as we do in the United States, good things happen because people act in their own interests. Whereas in Iran, you've had these mullahs have been in charge now for decades, and they've run the country into the ground, much as like the Chavistas have run Venezuela into the ground, another hydrocarbon-rich country. Or, the corruption in Nigeria has hobbled that country. So, yes, other countries have bigger hydrocarbon reserves and resources than the U.S. We're just exploiting them better because we have the rule of law and we have this incredible system, this incredible flywheel of entrepreneurial capitalism that is working within the constraints of an imperfect system, but one that's a hell of a lot better than any of the others around.
Encouraged to become educated? Is it in the understanding nuclear? Where is the gap? Because we have some kind of learning gap. Go ahead, take a couple seconds and explain that, would you please?
Well, sure. And I said before, the system we have is largely the system we're going to have, and I think that's true. And what are we seeing in the electric sector in particular is a lot of coal being displaced by gas. Now, what is the longer term? I think we should be moving more toward nuclear power, but that's going to take a while and longer probably than we have to discuss before the break. But nevertheless, there's a lot of potential in nuclear energy, and we can exploit it. But we're going to have to get busy.
But please let everybody know how they can find your fine work.
Well, I'm easy to find on the interweb, on the Google. robertbryce.substack.com is where I'm doing almost all of my writing these days. I also have two documentaries. You can find them at juicethemovie.com and juicetheseries.com. Two documentaries. I'm very proud of them. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. Oh yeah, I'm on TikTok, baby. I'm on TikTok. Hell yes.
Yeah, right.
So yes, I have I'm not the king of the internet, but I'm easy to find.
Robert, would you please finish your thoughts on Osage and why it's so important for people to understand this microcosm, as we talked about with the Michigan thing too, please?
Sure. Well, so I told you earlier, I've been a reporter my whole career, and I used to think the liberal media was a fiction. I don't anymore. So I've mentioned this Osage decision in federal court in Tulsa, unprecedented ruling, unprecedented. Nothing else like this has ever happened at all, anywhere in the United States or even around the world. There have only been a handful of wind turbines that have been taken down ever due to local opposition. And I think there was one in Falmouth, Massachusetts. It was 2 wind turbines. This is 84. Okay, so now it has been more than 2 weeks because the decision was handed down on December 18th. There has not been a single story, Tom, in the New York Times, New York Times. There's none in the Wall Street Journal, none in Bloomberg, none in Washington Post or NPR covering this article about the Osage decision. It's incredible, absolutely incredible, that the alt energy business has such a sway over legacy media outlets that they won't even cover the story. And so I mention Enel has to take the wind turbines down. 84 wind turbines, 150 megawatts at a cost of roughly $300 million. That's their estimate. And according to the judge's ruling, restore the land to its original condition. Further, the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, including the Department of Interior, represented by the Department of Justice, and the tribe, and awarded damages. Now, the damages weren't enormous. I think the tribe had a reasonable belief that they should get paid more than $100 million because of the damages. The judge did not give them that, but she gave nominal damages and ordered Enel to pay attorney's fees. Now, one other quick point regarding the attorneys. Enel has now had over 30 different lawyers work on this case. Two of the main firms that are working for Enel are Gibson Dunn and Norton Fulbright. These are two of the biggest law firms in America and, in fact, the world. Norton Fulbright has 3,000 lawyers on their staff. So here you have a multinational company based in Rome, goes into Osage County in Indian country, Bigfoots them, tries to ignore them, tries to, run roughshod over them. The tribe says, hell no. And this is partly a testament to Chief Jeffrey Standing Bear, to Everett Waller, the head of the Osage Minerals Council, standing up and saying, no, we're not going to put up with this. And also the late Joe Connor, who did heroic work on this. But the Osage tribe said, we're not going to put up with this. Are you crazy? And here we have now, more than a decade or more than a century after Chief James Bigheart had the vision of understanding the importance of mineral rights, that the tribe has prevailed in federal court in an unprecedented case. And I get worked up about it because I've seen how the wind business acts in rural America. And this is such a massive win for both rural Americans and for Native American sovereignty. It's just an absolutely incredible result. And even more incredible, or just as incredible, that the effing New York Times and the rest of these characters, these reporters who think they're, covering energy and power, they won't write about it because it doesn't fit the narrative around alternative energy.
Robert, what are the snapshots that we need to let people understand? I mean, we've talked about the robustness of the network. That's going to take time. The nuclear thing, that's going to take time. So please help us understand so that people, when they frame this up in their head, they know how to vote correctly.
Sure.
And be smart with their vote. Please go right ahead.
Well, I'm not going to tell anyone how to vote. People can vote however they want. But my answer to, or the way I would answer what you just said is, I'm an energy humanist. I'm for more energy. I'm pro people. And what do people need? What do humans need? What in particular do women and girls need? They need electricity. They need it cheap, abundant, reliable. And we've got this idea, when we've been, frankly, just bombarded with propaganda. And that's the right word. It's the right word and the wrong word. The difference is, as Mark Twain said, is quite a large thing. It's the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. The propaganda that we've been inundated with around climate and climate catastrophism has made people believe, oh, well, we in the U.S., we're going to lead and the rest of the world is going to follow. I'm sorry, it's just not true. There are 2 billion people in the world today who are still cooking with traditional biomass. A quarter of the world's population is still cooking with wood, dung, wheat straw. It's incredible. And more people die every year. 3.2 million, according to the World Health Organization. More people die every year. Most of them are women and girls, by the way. 3.2 million per year die from indoor air pollution caused by low-quality cooking fuels than die from AIDS, HIV, cholera, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. And yet we're just inundated with these claims of, oh, we just need to use less energy. Or as one acquaintance told me a long time ago, he's, oh, energy's too cheap. I thought, for who? It's not too cheap for you. You're rich. You can afford expensive energy. But people who live on the edge, who live on the the very low rungs of the working class, they can barely afford the food on their table, much less more expensive gasoline. So we need to adjust our thinking and become, instead of catastrophists, become energy humanists.
Want to give us a takeaway on this one called Robust?
Oh, sure. No, well, first, thanks. It's just always great fun, Tom, to talk about these things. And, it's, I'm incredibly lucky to do what I do. It's my purpose and my passion. I get to, talk about these issues. It's just an incredible opportunity. I'm so fortunate in my career. The people who are listening, I just encourage you to, understand what's going on. Read. Don't believe anybody. Don't believe me. Do your own work. But all of this, what we're inundated with around energy and climate issues, a lot of us is just flat propaganda. So I encourage you to educate yourself, know your math, know your physics. Subscribe to my things. I'm proud of what I do. I don't carry water for anybody. These are the energy is the most important business in the world, and every other business depends on it. So I encourage you to learn about it, and don't be afraid to be pro energy and pro human.
Robert Bryce is a king. I mean, unbelievably great guy. And I'm just so fortunate to have such friends like him. I just appreciate all of our guests and all of our listeners and everyone so much. You got to go back if you missed that third and fourth segments of the episode of this episode where Robert's talking about the Osage decision. You must go check that out. Okay, it's a fascinating story and it's coming across America. Until next time, everybody. I'm Papa Tom. This has been the Tom Matt Show. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe, please do all those good things. And again, thank you so much to Vanessa for everything she does. Peace out, everybody. Love y'all. We are out.